Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Longevity. I'm Dr. Kieran Lord and my co-host is Dr. Kai. Today we're going to talk about all things NAD. NAD is a real hot topic at the moment and there's so much misinformation out there. So we really want to get down to the information that's real that you need to know before you start on your NAD journey. I'm very happy to say that we're joined by Dr. Michael Harkness, who is the lead doctor at the NAD clinic. He is also a member of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine and alongside that also works as an A&E doctor in the NHS. Hi Michael, thanks for coming along.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
No
nice
problem
to see
at
you
all.
both again.
So we actually met Michael at the Menopause and Aesthetics Conference recently, and honestly, we spoke afterwards and your sort of passion and interest and knowledge around NAD was second to none. And we're like, we really need to get this guy on the podcast because it'd be so valuable. So if you don't mind, just start by telling us a little bit about sort of your journey, how you ended up, moving across from A&E medicine into NAD.
Yeah, for sure. I still love A&E and I was definitely going to go down that path and kind of go into training. I think I've always had an interest in kind of longevity and specifically lifestyle medicine, so I did a lot of work with them. But I'm also interested in kind of the pharma and nutraceutical element and supplement element about kind of performance optimization and taking people to the next level. That's how I started learning about NAD, and that's how I started working with NAD Clinic. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of clinics and different companies manufacturing NAD now. Why I went with those guys was mainly the team involved, to be honest. So their scientific officer is a very academic guy. He's a doctor from Canada who lives in Japan now. He's been working with NAD for around 20, 25 years. I don't think there's many people that have that academic knowledge that he has. So I had a few chats with him. He really inspired me. And then reading about the products, seeing the results in clients from the product as well was what kind of really got me involved in it. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get into the kind of science. It's a very complex molecule. It's a very exciting time. It's important to understand what we know and also what we don't know as well, I feel.
Brilliant. I mean, for us, we're using NAD in our Talking Longevity clinics, and we've done quite a bit of research behind it ourselves as well. I think one of the things that we want the general public to understand is what the difference is between NAD and NMN.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of products out there. And I know that you and I both attended a talk where they debunked some of the products that were on Amazon that didn't actually have any product in them, no active ingredients.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think what I'd like you to talk about, or what I'd like to know from you is, what is the difference between NAD and NMN? And what should people look out for in a product if they are going to buy it themselves?
Yeah,
I mean, I recommend they go to a reputable clinic.
Yeah.
But yes, if you can give us some information on that.
100%. I mean, the oral precursor argument, we could go in for days between kind of NR, NMN and NAD. But so NAD plus, NAD is actually negatively charged. Everyone thinks NAD plus is positive, but the positive charge is only on the nitrogen. Overall, it's got 2 phosphate groups, so it's overall a negatively charged. NMN is also negatively charged because it has 1 phosphate group. So I think the main argument around the precursors is that how do they enter the cell essentially?
Yeah.
So NAD plus as a whole molecule, it actually can enter the cell. It's very difficult to, and it can't pass the cell membrane easily, but there are specific, what we call active transporters, so it requires energy to enter the cell. NMN is the same, so NMN is negatively charged, so that actually can't enter the cell freely. Only NR or nicotinamide riboside can enter the cell.
Yeah.
So without going kind of too far down the rabbit hole in what precursor is best, you can ask one clinician, one academic researcher what is best, and everyone will give you answers. And you have to remember there's also massive commercial conflicts of interest in this all over. I know some people that really support kind of NAD plus whole capsules, but they have kind of investment in that company and they've put a lot of money into the research and development because obviously they're going to back that. I think for all of them, they all have a place and I believe they all actually work. Say if you take a whole NAD plus supplement, a lot of that has been broken down then into NMN, NR, and we know NR can directly pass the cell membrane essentially. So I do think all the oral precursors definitely have a place.
Yeah.
I think the largest evidence base is definitely around NR, and that's in mainly kind of combating neuroinflammation, so inflammation in brain cells essentially. So I think there's massive clinical kind of benefit specifically for NR in the future. But again, we're in the early stages of human trials with a lot of these supplements essentially. So more and more research needs to come out. In answer to your second question, just about what to look out for, you should always be looking at the essentially certificate of analysis on these supplements.
Yeah.
So you need to be looking at kind of always make sure that it's signed off by a kind of senior pharmacist or senior clinician at whatever lab. Make sure you contact the lab and have a look at their third party testing. And properly go through the actual certificate of analysis. There's also LAL testing, which looks at endotoxins as well. So that's on a lot of certificate analysis and lets you know the kind of if there is anything present. And then also the percentage quantity of how much actual NAD there is.
Yeah.
In a lot of supplements in the IVs, it's normally the beta version of NAD. But it should always come with a kind of exact percentage of how much is in that vial or that supplement.
Yeah. And I think if people go to a good clinic that's known out there, then you know they've done the research beforehand.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think as clinicians, when you are looking to buy it, that's when you should be really looking at all these products in the detail that you gave.
Yeah.
So just as a little brief thing, if you were going NAD versus NMN, what would you go for?
It really depends. I think I'd go with NAD as a whole, and the reason for that, and I know so many people would disagree with me, because NMN as an oral precursor is actually very well researched, not as well researched as NR, but it is very well researched. And the reason why is I think it makes sense kind of theoretically. NAD plus, if you take the whole molecule of it, it's broken down into all of the different precursors and it has all the molecules. If you're just taking NMN, you're missing a phosphate group there. Yeah. So there's one aspect of NAD that isn't present.
Yeah.
So that would be my argument. I think as well, David Sinclair was the main guy that brought about the whole NMN, and whether you think he's controversial or not, it is kind of relatively controversial, some of the things that he's come out with, and that's his kind of hallmark molecule. Essentially, that's how he's made his millions. So I err on the side of caution and go with NAD plus as a whole pill form, essentially.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence out there, isn't there? I think a lot of it, you said, there's a lot of stuff from waiting on human trials. Actually, there's loads of evidence on animal studies, on mice trials, and that's where a lot of the data's from, and that is really promising.
It's really exciting.
One thing I was going to touch on when you mentioned about the sort of the supplements and where you buy them from, and I have so many people who say, I've seen this one online because this one popped up on Instagram, or this one's on Amazon. Actually, one thing that I've really noticed is a lot of them claim to be really, I've got a really high concentration of active ingredient, I've got a really high concentration of NMN.
Yeah.
The concentration is irrelevant almost. Sorry, that's the wrong way to say it, but the concentration itself is only part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah.
How much you can actually absorb is the next thing. It could be 100% pure, but if you can't absorb it, it's of no use to you.
That's what I mean. So there's liposomal capsules that have come out, and I'm not really entirely sure if the evidence base is completely there. I guess it makes sense why that would definitely enhance absorption. I think these things are really, really difficult to measure as well, like extremely. I mean, even kind of if you were doing that through kind of NAD serum sampling, the blood testing is. NAD is very unstable. It's continually recycling between the kind of reduced form NADH back to NAD plus. So it's very difficult to measure it in serum, to be honest, just because of how much it's changing throughout the day.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to measure.
It's really
like that.
difficult.
However, you do see the difference physically in people.
Yes.
And from what we've seen, I don't think we can deny how this impacts people. I've had people that have come in that have been very skeptical, and they've come in thinking this isn't going to make any difference. But then they've come back to me and said, I can't believe the difference. And the energy that they get quite quickly after having NAD. Can you explain why they get that?
Yeah, sure. I can try. So the clinic I work for, we specialize in IV wellness, which has become quite a nuanced term. And I know a lot of traditional medics don't agree with it, and they don't agree with NAD and all this kind of stuff because the clinical evidence base isn't there yet. It's growing and it's going in the right direction, but it's not quite there yet. So specific, I kind of, the main thing I prescribe is infusions, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we see is in infusions, we're delivering a relatively higher dose directly into the vein, into the blood vessel. That NAD, and we know there's a study in 2019 by a guy called Ross Grant. He's kind of one of the pioneering NAD researchers. What we see when NAD enters the bloodstream, one, some of the whole molecule is actively absorbed. We think that's a small amount, but some of it must be being actively absorbed, essentially. Yeah. And two, it's rapidly metabolized into NR, NMN, the precursors, which can then go into the cell and produce NAD, increasing intracellular NAD. But there's also really interesting kind of metabolites and breakdown products of NAD. So one's adenosine monophosphate. And we think these are part of the reason as to why we can upregulate people's energy. I mean, just kind of going off tangent here, and pull me back if I start just rambling. Adenosine monophosphate, really, really important. It kind of mimics the effects of exercise, like reduces kind of fatty acid oxidation, reduces endoplasmic reticulum stress. Adenosine as well, massively inhibitory molecule. So we think that's why it's been so helpful in addiction back in the 1960s and 70s, which is when it was initially used. So it's not a licensed treatment for addiction in the UK, but we think that's why it was having really profound effects on people with kind of chronic alcohol use.
Yeah.
With kind of alcohol withdrawal and chronic alcohol use, you're very excitatory. Adenosine is very inhibitory and suppresses these areas, and it's also very anti-inflammatory. It works. Specifically, adenosine works on kind of inhibiting T cell regulation and things. So again, it's a very multifaceted approach. But regarding the initial uptake in energy, I think that's due to the increase in the intracellular levels of NAD+, because that is the kind of the most essential part of metabolism.
Yeah.
I can go into that quickly, actually.
Yeah,
just how I describe it to patients in a kind of lay way is, in every cell in your body, you have a battery called the mitochondria, and that requires electrons to produce energy. I describe NAD+ as the kind of shuttle bus, which carries electrons from outside the cell inside the cell. So if you have the more shuttle buses that you're having, at a better rate, the more electrons you can transport into the cell and the more energy the cell can generate. And when a cell generates more energy, it's kind of like if you wake up in the morning with low energy, the tasks that you fulfill are going to be done at a not as good of a rate, essentially, and not as optimal as if you were high energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No.
I like that. I think we can use that, actually.
It's a really good way
nice
to explain it.
Yeah.
Because that was one of my questions I was going to say to you, actually. I felt like do we need to go back and explain it? But that's a really good way of explaining it so people understand, NAD's out there all over the place, but I think there's so much misinformation.
Yeah.
And actually, just putting it very simply, it's an energy source. It helps your cells work better.
Yeah, supercharges your cells. That's what, I say it as well, yeah.
And you also mentioned that you use infusions
the
most. Why do you use infusions more than IM versus oral? Or do you use all of them? Because we use a bit of a combo.
Yeah, fair enough.
So,
I mean, infusions are expensive, and when you're having an infusion, they're very uncomfortable. They're not for everyone.
No.
But what I see in clients is a much faster result using infusions, essentially. So the main kind of client I get, we're wellness. Again, we're not treating any kind of medical condition with it. How I say it is we're kind of taking someone from well to super well. We're optimizing their performance. But we get the occasional person. The main kind of client that we have coming through is someone with severe brain fog. The many perimenopausal, menopausal ladies.
Yeah.
Gone down the traditional route, had all the hormones done, had all the blood work done, examination, everything's essentially normal, but they're still having this severe brain fog. So they'll come to me, they're like, oh yeah, we've read about it, we know it can increase energy production. So I'm always kind of clear, this is not a licensed treatment for menopause. It's an alternative therapy. It could help this way, it could help that way. And we see a massive improvement in these ladies, especially, mainly with kind of things like night sweats. You guys are experts in menopause anyway, so you'll probably know this better than me, but which improvement in alleviation of brain fog, mental sharpness, better mental clarity, more energy throughout the day, less fatigue throughout the day. But the main one that I see is alleviation of brain fog. And the exact process of how it works, I'm sure it's very complicated and multifaceted, but it seems to be working very well, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that was one thing I wanted to ask you actually about that, because in our Talking Longevity clinic, we do longevity, but there's a big focus on menopause just naturally, because I'm obs and gynae by background,
exactly,
Kai, GP with women's health interest in the background. And this is something that we had quite a few women contact us and ask about NAD for menopausal symptoms.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot now out there where, the traditional treatment is here's some hormones, and actually a lot of people either don't want hormones, don't want artificial hormones, and are looking at these alternative type therapies.
Exactly.
So is this something that you're finding, are you getting a lot of women coming through? Are you getting a lot of good results from them?
Yeah, to be honest, most of my clients are women. I think women are more keen to kind of get started, because obviously it is alternative therapy, and not everyone knows about it. It's a complex substance, but yeah, 100%. I mean, the kind of wellness benefits that we're seeing, it's very kind of uniform. We're seeing the same kind of things, because a lot of the medics I speak to as well, like a lot of my friends just think it's all placebo and essentially.
Yeah.
But I think across the world now globally, because I speak to doctors all over the world using this, we're seeing the same results clinically and consistently. So there is definitely a process going on where it's having the same benefits in clients globally and
something's
uniformly.
working, isn't it?
Something is working.
And I think all these things, you've got to start somewhere before you get through to the clinical trial. The clinical trials come over time.
Like flucloxacillin didn't have a clinical evidence base initially.
No.
It takes time.
You need the real world evidence, and then over time you build up that huge number of people on it to the point that you can start to do studies.
Yeah.
But at this point, not even anecdotal evidence, but evidence from real life patients you're seeing, and in the numbers you're seeing as well. It's really important.
I mean, there's a lot of really interesting case reports as well, specifically on neurodegenerative disorders. I know it's only kind of one or two single patients, but things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, there's quite a few case reports in Australia where they're given kind of 1.5 grams, so quite high dosage of NAD IV in Parkinson's patients. I'm not saying that they're reversing the progression of Parkinson's disease, it's a progressive illness. But what they are seeing is improvement in quality of life by reduced tremors or improvement in mood, things like that. Obviously, NAD is not a licensed treatment for any neurodegenerative disease in the UK, but I think as an alternative therapy, potential really exciting clinical outcomes in the future.
And the evidence for that, actually, I think the evidence they're using for that, or one of the arguments saying why it will help with neurodegenerative conditions, is around sort of its effect on insulin sensitivity.
So,
a lot of, you heard of type 3 diabetes for Alzheimer's and things where the brain becomes, or the cells become resistant to insulin.
Yeah.
And therefore, potentially you develop Alzheimer's disease. And there's huge studies that show the link there. And actually, we know NAD does help with insulin sensitivity, and therefore there's potential link there, which is why you're getting the beneficial effects.
Yeah, 100% as well. And I think just kind of protecting the nerves, your axons, essentially preventing the degradation of that. Also upregulating kind of neurotransmitters as well. It's got so many kind of outputs. Yeah. It's got over kind of 300 to 500 kind of known processes that NAD plus is involved with, essentially. Kind of massive anti-inflammatory benefits as well. And your brain cells actually require high levels of NAD plus, essentially. They're some of the most metabolically active cells in the body. So
I think that leads on quite nicely to, its effects on insulin, but we also wanted to talk about its effects on weight loss and diabetes in general, because there is an effect. But can you talk to us about why you think that might be happening? Why it helps with weight loss? Why it helps with diabetes? Yeah,
to be honest, I don't really come across that much in my clinic. To be honest, it's not really something I'm trying to do with weight loss. People don't come to NAD clinic for kind of weight loss. I have seen some studies. In animal models, it's kind of very promising in kind of upregulating insulin sensitivity. In some early clinical trials as well, I've seen with specifically NR upregulating adiponectin, so kind of breaking down adipose tissue. I'm not. Again, it's not something I do relatively often and deal with in terms of weight loss. I mean, clinically and anecdotally, I have clients come back to me saying I could lose weight so much more easily. And I think one of the main kind of theoretical arguments for that, you're upregulating your metabolism, aren't you? It's meaning your cells are operating more efficiently. They're producing more energy. So that can definitely aid in terms of weight loss.
Yeah, I think when we are using it, we don't use it as a weight loss option, but we say this will aid your weight loss. And if you're trying and you're using changing your lifestyle and using NAD, it's going to help you.
Lifestyle always the key, of course. Do you guys see that much in your clinics in how much you're aiding with weight loss?
Yeah. I think we have seen a difference in it, and it's more people coming back and saying, look, I've been doing this lifestyle stuff for a while, but now that I've added NAD to it,
interesting.
Suddenly the lifestyle stuff that I'm doing is working more.
You've got more energy, haven't you? More drive to get up and go.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think for people who are, there's all this work around weight loss jabs and things like that. And I think they all come with risks and they're not suitable for everybody. And particularly if somebody's not, got a high enough BMI or something like that, it's probably not the right thing for them. And at that point, that's when you sort of discuss, well, what about NAD? If you're doing all these lifestyle factor modification things, however, you're still struggling because actually you haven't got the energy to get up and go to the gym in the morning before work and things like that. Actually, that NAD boost might be that thing you need just to kind of get you motivated, get you there.
And I think we're particularly seeing it in the menopausal women. As a GP, as a gynae doctor, we're seeing these women that always come in and say, I've been doing this forever and I've lost weight, but now suddenly I've gained a lot of weight. And we know that's hormone related. We know that's cortisol related and everything. But the NAD once they start taking it, they're almost going back to what they used to do and getting better results. So I'm finding that quite interesting. Obviously, there's still changes that you have to make. When your body changes, you can't be the 20-year-old self losing weight.
Course,
you've got to do that alongside it. But
you do hear really remarkable things. And again, there's evidence in animal models for this, but no kind of clinical early human trials for it. But I have a lot of fertility naturopaths refer me clients now for NAD infusions pre-IVF.
Yes.
And they say they get kind of profound results of it. Again, it is not a registered licensed treatment for fertility. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying clinically and anecdotally, we do get referrals
from plenty of things that work that haven't got the evidence behind them yet. So I'm not surprised by that at all.
And also, if you're really trying for that baby and nothing is working,
exactly,
is it worth a shot?
And in animal models, there's really strong evidence for NAD to support kind of oocyte preservation. That's the biggest area. In kind of fertility. It's a study in mice essentially, but again, still very, very interesting.
As are most things, aren't they? Studies in mice.
Yeah, studies in humans. There's just too many variables. Especially when you're doing longevity, you're going to have for wait to 50 years for someone to die, and then we'll know all-cause mortality for it essentially. So,
but the evidence, if it works in mice, there's strong links that it would work in humans.
Exactly, not all the time, but definitely an argument for it, 100%.
One thing we may not know with mice, but you said to me you've noticed with your patients you're treating, is the effect on hair and skin. Probably doesn't correspond to mice very well. But,
I wondered where you were going with this. I was like, I definitely haven't treated any mice. So I think I'm seeing differences in hair and skin. And when I treat people for hair loss, and both of us are obviously doing longevity skin as well, one of the things we say to them is there's almost no point, but don't spend your money on all of these things for your injectables if you're not going to treat yourself from within. That's lifestyle, that's supplements. I'm a big fan of pro and prebiotics. But I've seen a difference with NAD as well. I've started treating people, then they've started taking the NAD, and the difference.
Is this subcutaneous? You've been giving your patients or oral subcutaneous?
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, so I think it's hard to measure how well you're seeing differences in patients' skin and hair because it's essentially subjective, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially subjective. I mean, theoretically, it makes perfect sense for your skin. NAD it's a really important cofactor for. Have you heard of PARPs? Poly-ADP ribose polymerases. So they're really responsible for DNA repair essentially. So as you get older, your skin is more prone to damage from UV radiation, from different disease processes. Your skin cells actually have really high levels of NAD plus as they have a fast replication rate essentially. So having higher NAD levels activates PARPs more, which is protecting DNA essentially. The less DNA is protected, the more likely unregulated replication is going to occur, which causes mutations and cancer, disease, pathology, essentially. So if you have high levels of NAD plus in your skin, it makes sense that it would be anti-aging. And again, I've seen the exact kind of same results. People say like, my skin just feels a lot younger, feels a lot more kind of like more hydrated and quite odd kind of clinical anecdotal.
And I think it's only subjective in people that don't have skin problems, but it's what I'm seeing is when people do have skin problems.
Wow, okay, you're seeing real
I'm
there
seeing
as
real,
well. That's really interesting,
so people with rosacea and hyperpigmentation and obviously hair loss, and I'm analysing the hair, I use a hair analyzer, and so you can actually see the growth. Okay. So what I'm finding is that the speed of the changes are quicker. Not in absolutely everyone. Like anything, it's not in everyone, but I am seeing it in quite a few people.
We do need to collect this evidence and just try and get more case reports. I'm trying to get 2 published by the end of this year.
Excellent.
Anything you do manage to get done, let us know because we'll
100%.
share it on our website and on the Instagram page because
appreciate it.
People could only get so much out of this podcast. And actually, if we sat here and talked through papers on a podcast, we'd have very few listeners. But actually, a lot of them are asking they want to go back and have a look at the data so we can share that with them.
100%.
You touched on something I wanted to ask you about. Was one of the big controversies or one of the big questions I'm getting from clients around NAD is they have seen that there's potential link with cancers. Now, what I've kind of explained to them is I said, from my reading, I've seen 2 sort of arguments. One is that, yes, it promotes cell proliferation and therefore potentially. However, I've also seen arguments in research that basically say it it supports your immune system.
Yeah.
And as your immune system plays a role in fighting cancer cells,
Exactly, yeah.
actually it may be beneficial. Do you know anything more than that? Have you got any research on that?
Yeah, kind of a little bit. So it's like what I spoke to you about before. So all of the kind of DNA repair enzymes, including sirtuins as well. I'm not sure you've heard of sirtuins. Are kind of described as the longevity genes, but essentially their main role is to regulate DNA replication, essentially. So reduce this unregulated DNA turnover to cause mutations, and that's what causes cancer, essentially. So sirtuins are activated by DNA, and most DNA repair proteins, including PARPs, what I mentioned before, their whole job is to essentially prevent cancer developing. So therefore theoretically having higher levels of NAD+, you upregulate these DNA repair proteins more and sirtuins more, which reduces the chance of kind of unregulated cell proliferation. The argument is, the theoretical argument as to why it could potentially trigger kind of tumorigenesis, is because all cells require NAD, including cancer cells, essentially. So if you're upregulating your levels of NAD+, you're potentially increasing your intracellular levels of NAD+ in malignant cells as well. So I completely get that. The evidence isn't there yet. It's definitely leaning more towards it being more cancer protective, especially in rats. Specifically hepatocellular carcinomas. There's a lot of research in it reducing kind of metastases and tumorigenesis, and specifically that type of cancer. How I kind of play it is, at our clinic, very specific. If you've had a cancer diagnosis within the past 3 years, you're not eligible for treatment. It's a contraindication, no kind of room or budging. It's interesting because I've actually had an oncologist refer me a patient for NAD therapy, kind of right at the start when I joined. So we don't know. We don't fully know yet. That's why let's just stay away from it and exercise on the sides of caution.
I think that's the evidence I've seen basically doesn't say, just to clarify, it doesn't say NAD. I've not seen any evidence that says NAD causes cancer.
Oh yeah.
What I've seen is that NAD. The worry is that it could potentially, if you've got a cancer that's undiagnosed at that point, it could make it worse. Which is probably why they're saying 3 years after having a diagnosis, while you're in remission, while you're still having your checkups, let's not risk it.
Exactly.
However, the evidence isn't there. Are there any other contraindications or any other people you don't treat?
So we don't give it to anyone under 18 for obvious reasons. I mean, if a kind of 18-year-old is deficient in NAD, or if they're having chronic fatigue or anything like that, I think there'll probably be some underlying organic pathology, so it shouldn't be used for that. Anyone pregnant and breastfeeding, again, just stay away from pregnant breastfeeding.
From everything. You can have paracetamol and that's
it. You can have some saline every now and again. That's about it. So they're the absolute contraindications. Regarding caution, so when I kind of train other clinics on how to use it, there are some cautions that we've seen just from clinically, essentially. So the main one is arrhythmias, and that's because so irregular heart rates, and that's just because when you're having an NAD infusion, it's a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it can make people a little bit nervous. It can cause not palpitations, but sometimes people get a bit of a rise in heart rate just because they're not used to the effects of it, because it can be quite uncomfortable.
Is that the same for the IM and the oral though?
So IM and subcutaneous, the effects are much more reduced. Some people get them for around 2 to 5 minutes. I do quite high doses, so I sometimes do 200 milligram subcut, which is quite a high dose on the side of subcutaneous. So when I do that, I get a little bit nauseous for like 2 or 3 minutes. It's nowhere near the IVs though. The IVs are tough. Even for me now, it's I'm getting quicker, but they're still not pleasant. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Other cautions that we look out for as well. So I've not seen this personally, but Dr. Alex, who I work with in Japan, he's sometimes seen moderate hypoglycemic episodes during NAD infusions. So insulin-dependent diabetics, I think I would just watch out for, make sure you're doing kind of BM before, during, and after. Again, I've not seen it, and maybe that's because he's working with a specific subset population in Japan. I'm talking about very, very moderate drops, by the way, not kind of hypoglycemia. People with kind of anxiety as well as kind of panic attack disorders, and again that's purely because when you're having the infusion it's a bit uncomfortable, and for some people who are a bit nervous, because I've seen it quite a few times in people that are very nervous with needles and very nervous with IVs, it's a bit overwhelming for them, even though it's very manageable. It's just that specific subset you do.
The palpitations almost a mimic
exactly
anxiety.
Well, you're already starting off at a baseline that's higher than anybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
You've absolutely touched on something I want to ask just at the end, but did you have anything else you wanted to?
There was just one more I was going to say as well.
Sorry,
just be obviously always be aware of any infusion with someone with severe renal impairment as well. So that's another kind of caution, and patients I'd wouldn't give an infusion to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing I wanted to ask you before you end it is for the clinicians that are listening out there that are starting off, what dose would you recommend starting with?
Yeah. So if it's a client walking into the clinic for the first time, just put everyone on 250 milligram dose. Okay. What we know about NAD is even at high doses, it's very safe. So that's why I really like working with it. I mean, you can go to kind of doses of 1.5 grams. In the wellness setting, I would never kind of recommend anyone to go over 500 milligram. There's some people that come and ask and they're kind of serious about NAD. They know what they want and they're very insistent on it. I'll be like, oh, that's okay then.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't ever go kind of over 500 milligrams. So everyone I start on 250 and then the next kind of dosage we do 500 milligram. It really depends. In kind of elderly people who have a few kind of medical conditions or on quite a few different medications, I know I'm quite safe, so I'll normally just keep them on 250 each time.
Yeah.
So again, it's really up to the clinician, but as a kind of rule of thumb, start everyone off on 250 milligram and then go to 500 milligram, and then I'd say doses of kind of 500 milligram.
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as well, it's important that you remember, obviously NAD is this amazing molecule, but it's important that people, obviously the body produces it itself. So kind of going overboard and constantly overdoing it is probably not going to do any good.
No.
Essentially, I think little is always the best way to go for it. So I kind of prescribe a program initially. So it's normally 5 sessions within a month. And then I stick very strictly with clients to once monthly maintenance doses after that, essentially. But yeah, less is always more with these things, I feel.
Yeah.
So you explain it very well. You know this stuff inside and out, and you're obviously very safe in the way you practice.
Yeah, always.
I think the risk with anything like this, NAD, and it has been weight loss jabs and other things in the past, there's a risk that if it's used poorly, then it can start to have negative effects. So my question was going to be, we have a lot of listeners who now I'm sure after that are going, where can I get it? I want NAD. What are kind of your top tips for anybody out there who's thinking, I've looked at it a bit online, I've seen it on Instagram and TikTok, I'm actually ready now to give this NAD a try. Any top tips you'd give them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely go and do your research about it. And I think whenever you're buying any kind of supplement, you need to be asking for certificates analysis. You need to be asking for kind of third party testing, independent testing. And if the site doesn't have that, then I wouldn't say that the lab is kind of validated, in my opinion. Look at reviews as well. Look at reviews of supplements. I think that's a big one. If people are getting, if someone has quite a lot of reviews and people are continually reporting the benefits of it, I think that's also a good one to go for sure. I think the main thing people are quite hesitant with is the injectables, because it's injecting something into your tummy. I think people associate that with kind of hormones and steroids and things, but it's not like that. It's a vitamin B3 derivative. It's not going to affect your hormonal levels. And I think definitely certificate of analysis, third party testing and reviews, I'd say for any kind of NAD supplement, that'd be my advice.
I think when you're looking for a clinic, you just need to do the same thing, really. Check for reviews. Because you're at the NAD.
Yes.
And,
definitely.
And that's all over the country, isn't it?
Yeah. So we've got a clinic in Marylebone, in Mayfair in London.
Yeah.
Make sure whenever you go into these clinics, make sure they're CQC registered. You can't be doing IVs if you're not CQC registered. Make sure they have a prescribing clinician. So the nurses we work with are a lot more experienced than me with NAD. They're probably working NAD for the longest of anyone in the country, over like 7-8 years. So we have very experienced members of staff that know what they're talking about, essentially. And we've got a really good research team in Japan as well that are constantly on the hot topic of what is new in the evidence base. We just need to be mindful. We know a lot about it, but we also don't know a lot about it as well. We can see all these amazing effects in clients and patients. We just need to get it published. My opinion.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I've learned a lot.
Me too.
I hope everybody listening has learned a lot from that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for coming in. I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Happily.
Thank you so much for listening in today, and I hope you found that as useful as I did. For those of you that want to understand the science a little bit more, please go onto our Instagram and you can see the papers that all three of us will be putting up. We're also going to put up a question and answer session on there. And Michael, I believe you're going to answer some of those questions as well, and we'll all answer it as well as we can. So please go ahead and let's keep talking longevity.